The world is becoming more diverse. The question is, are we the people of God becoming more united? I'm Alex Diaz. Welcome to Mosaix Today with Rachel and Mark. On each episode of this podcast, you'll discover unique insights, hear from credible practitioners, and learn promising practices to help you build a healthy, multi-ethnic, culturally intelligent, socially just, and financially sustainable church. The kingdom of God is not segregated. Why on earth is the church? And now, here's your host, Rachel and Mark.
Welcome to our latest episode of Mosaix Today with Rachel and Mark. I'm one of your hosts, Rachel Gilmore, here with the amazing Mark DeMaz. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, good, Rachel. I'd say the amazing Rachel Gilmore and just say Mark DeMaz. That's fine enough, but great to be with you again.
We'll flip a coin, right? It's awesome. I love these conversations. I learn so much. It's just fun to collaborate based on the fact that we come from different backgrounds, right? You're in Arkansas. I'm now in Phoenix, most recently from Nashville and Virginia Beach. But just the difference with our age, I'm with a denomination, you're non-denom. I learned so much. And I feel like these conversations help model the kind of bridge building we want to do in society, right? Where we're not all exactly the same. And that's important because the kingdom is very diverse. And so if we can't find a way to embrace differences, love each other, learn from each other, then we're going to be disappointed when we get to heaven because that's what it's going to be all about. So
yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
Listening and learning. Yeah, listening and learning. That's what it's all about. I learn as much from you as you do from me. And of course, that's the way it should be, right? We're never too old to learn. I am old, but I'm not too old to learn.
And I have so much to learn. And I'm excited about what we're going to be learning today, which is like the what and how and why of CQ and the cultural quotient. So a little bit of my backstory with this, I had never heard of CQ. And so when I was on staff at Discipleship Ministries with the United Methodist Church, and I realized the deep need for more intercultural awareness, not just for myself, but for the planters that I was assessing and training, I got IDI certified, the Intercultural Development Inventory. It was a great experience. And I've really been inspired by the work of a friend of mine, Brandon Rensher, who's planting a church in Greensboro. And he talks about how, as you know, I'm a white woman, right? So white pastors can have this spiritual concealment where we don't have to face or acknowledge some of our own baggage or the damage or harm that we're doing, or the white supremacy or the lack of intercultural awareness that we're living out. And I don't want to do any harm. I want to live and love the way Christ does. And so these intercultural quotient, these tools, these resources, I feel are so invaluable to anyone in any type of leadership in the church or just participating in the church so that we can really engage in works and acts of healing and equity. So with a little bit of my backstory, tell me about CQ. Mark, what's the relationship? How did you get involved with CQ and what is it?
Yeah, you've heard of IQ, right? Your intelligent quotient. You've heard of EQ, your emotional intelligence, if you will. CQ is the same thing. It's called cultural intelligence, but really you should think about it as cross-cultural intelligence, right? The intelligence that you have to engage people who are different than you, whether that's ethnically, economically, nationally, what have you. What is your intelligence in terms of relating to people cross-culturally, right? So that's what CQ is. We were very fortunate. A friend of mine named Dave Livermore has written roughly 7 or 8 books on this subject. He got involved in CQ in the early 2000s. CQ was originally developed starting in the 1980s, kind of fast forward to 2000, really thinking about in the world of business. For instance, if I'm an American and I'm a business person and I go to China to win a contract to do business in China, you have to have some measure of self-awareness and cultural intelligence in order to go there and be effective in your engagement with the Chinese around a business contract. Again, using this analogy, right? This isn't true, but let me just give you an example. Let's say in another culture, you never talk about business until you've been to dinner at least 3 times. Let's just say that was a core cultural norm. If you don't know that, because in America, we're like, hey, how you doing, Rachel? Good to see you today. Okay, let's talk about business, right? So if you don't know in another culture, there are these certain norms, these perspective, that you could go there and blow the contract. Like you could lose it because you went in 10 minutes, you're talking to them about business when they're thinking, who is this person? And we haven't even gone to dinner yet. It's that. So this is really what's behind the idea and the development of CQ. Now, Dave Livermore got involved, some people at the University of Taiwan, Michigan State. And to make a long story short, in the mid-2000s or so, they developed an assessment tool It's now been validated by more than 100 peer-reviewed journals. It's been taken by 150,000 people in over 165 countries. So what happened is in 2019, they put out an RFQ, basically a request for proposals, looking for a cross-culturally intelligent organization to which they could license all their faith-based business in North America. And we were very fortunate to be chosen out of all the people that applied, Mosaix Global Network. And on January 1st of 2020, we signed a contract just before the pandemic to be able to deliver at affordable rates cultural intelligence assessment and training for churches, Christian schools, faith-based nonprofits. And we've been doing it ever since. Our first client in June started in August of 2020 was Our Daily Bread. I think to date, we're up to like 1,500 people, 30-something organizations. We work with Our Daily Bread to this day, Pepperdine, John Brown University, scores of churches, Denver Christian School, our Traders Point in Indiana. So lots of different people I'm just throwing out across the board, from churches to Christian schools to even Christian universities. We are doing this work now on behalf of the CQ Center.
So when someone signs up and they, learn about their own cultural intelligence, I mean, I'm asking this question, but I was fortunate enough to take the CQ, so I learned from it as well. You take this assessment and then it gives you two things, right? You want to talk a little bit about the 4 characteristics and the 10 cultural value continuums?
So you're basically asking what actually gets assessed. And let me back up and say, if you're a pastor or ministry leader leading an organization, or even if you're in one and you'd like to bring this assessment and training tool to your staff, which we highly recommend, let me just say this. Majority culture churches, more than ever before, perhaps in this country, right now in Christian organizations, majority culture leaders are asking one question: tell me what to do. In light of the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, they've thrown in the towel. They say, I don't know what I don't know. I need help. Just tell me what to do, meaning organizationally. That person, based on their experience, who they know, what they've read, or what they've done, they might recommend this book. They say, oh, you know what I'd do? I'd take this book and I'd study it with your staff. Or somebody else, they go to somebody else, say, you know what you need to do? You need to go on a justice journey. Or you know what you need to do? You need to do this. And so depending on the person of color in their sphere of influence, who they know, and they ask that question of, they're going to get a random remedy, right? They're going to get a random remedy. Now, what that's equivalent to is like this. Let's say, Rachel, you say, man, Mark, I haven't been feeling well last few weeks. And I say, oh, Rachel, it's allergy season. Why don't you go up to Walgreens and get some Claritin? I bet you'll feel better. Right. And then you talk to your husband and you go, man, I'm just not feeling myself. He says, honey, you just need a good night's sleep. Go get some NyQuil-Z. It'll knock you out. You'll get a good night's sleep. You talk to somebody else and they say, you need some vitamin C, boost your immune system. Go to Walgreens, get some vitamin C. So depending on who you're talking to, these people give these random suggestions, these random remedies. So you go to Walgreens, you take all that, right? You still don't feel good. You go to the doctor. He says, let's get to the bottom of this, right? So you get put into an MRI tube. You come out of the MRI tube and you know what they say? You know what, Rachel, your problem is you have a stomach ulcer. So think about it. Vitamin C is a great product. Doesn't treat a stomach ulcer. Claritin, great product. Doesn't treat a stomach ulcer. Because your body, Rachel Gilmore's body, is different than Mark DeMaz's body, and different than so-and-so's body, different than your husband's body. So we got to know what is wrong with your body. Where are you in terms of both your health and in terms of potential weakness or opportunities for strength and healing? And we got to find that out for Rachel Gilmore. Once we know, the doctors know, oh, you've got a stomach ulcer, then they prescribe specific treatment, right? So they'll say, we need to do surgery, repair the tear. On the backside of that, we're going to put you on these 2 prescriptions that'll help aid in the healing, prevent infection, and we're going to send you to 6 weeks of physical therapy. Once you have a specific diagnosis, we can treat that. The doctors, I'm not a doctor, the doctors can treat that with specific remedy, right? And that's how you get better. That's what CQ does. We're going to put your church body, your Christian organization, faith-based school, what have you, into a cultural intelligence MRI. We're going to get a report. We're going to see where you're strong and where there's opportunities for growth. And then we're going to come like doctors on the back end. We're going to do some training. We're going to process that group report with you. And then we're going to say, based on the empirical data, here are the prescribed remedies that will help you get stronger and grow in the areas of weakness going forward. That's essentially the metaphor of what we do in terms of CQ assessment and training with organizations.
So I love that, not only because if you actually want to enact change and help, address issues of racism, systemic racism in your community, in your faith community, in your own life. That's the most effective way to do it. But it also, I love how you began. A lot of, dominant culture pastors reach out to a friend, a person of color, and say, oh, what should I do? How should I fix it? And so not only, you're right, they don't necessarily know what the specific issues are of this church culture, but also then it puts the onus again on BIPOC friends or leaders to solve the problem that we created. And they're probably already exhausted or overwhelmed or sick of having to speak for their entire culture or ethnicity or race. And so this also kind of prevents harm that might come from that too. Like, I have a problem, instead of me figuring it out and learning and embracing it, I'm going to ask other people to tell me how to fix my problem. CQ is a way to come directly, like you said, take this assessment, get a report. And I know for me, when I took it, it was super helpful, especially, and I know you're going to talk about the characteristics and the value continuums, but one of the most valuable things for me was saying, hey, I'm in Phoenix now, way different culture than Nashville. And actually the majority of my neighbors are non-white, they're from the Latina community. And so looking at my continuum and saying, I'm very individualistic, but guess what? The culture, the community I'm called to serve is very communal and they're community based. So what does that mean for me? How do I need to shift and change my leadership style? Knowing that from the get-go before I even start planting a church, so I can start doing that work on my own, has just been very valuable for me. So I know I skipped ahead a little bit, but talk to us when you get this report, this diagnosis. What are these 4 characteristics? What is the value continuum? How is this helpful?
I promise I'm getting there, but you bring up a great point. I don't want people to miss it. We have to do our own work. Because as I mentioned, majority culture pastors, ministry leaders, et cetera, we're all saying, tell me what to do. People of color are asking of us 2 questions. Are you willing to do the work? And are you willing to pay a price? That could be money. Like, these things cost money. Sure. It can be sacrifice. People in your church don't get what you're saying, and so they leave. Are you willing to pay that price to pitch your organization to the future and become an equitable organization, one that is just, one that is biblically sound, healthy, multi-ethnic, et cetera? So that's the question they're answering. And the great thing about CQ, Rachel, for an organization is it instantly begins to answer those questions. It gives you some measure of credibility and trust with people of color because you're willing to do the work, you're willing to pay the price. So what happens in CQ assessment is we give an assessment. We typically assess the paid staff of an organization along with its key lay leaders. But people that are shaping the culture and have the responsible authority of the church, that's who you assess. You don't have to assess every member of your church, just that group, right? So let's just say that group is 25 people. When you put the staff together with the key lay leadership, it equals 25 people. 25 people take a 15 to 20 minute assessment online individually. They get it instantly. When they hit submit, a 21-page, very intuitive, good looking, think Apple products report where you can see how you measure and the things we'll talk about in a moment. What we do then is we average the scores to create a group report, and that tells you where the cultural intelligence of the church is at that moment. We then deliver 6 hours of training to the organization, to that staff, to those 25 people, processing the report, what was found, looking for all kinds of different information that we bring to the table, have conversation about. And then again, on the back end, we say, okay, next steps then, here's what it looks like. We're the doctors at that point prescribing specific remedy based on the empirical data. In the assessment itself, this is what you asked, what gets measured. 2 different tracks, if you will. First, 4 characteristics. They call them, CQ calls it drive, knowledge, strategy, and action. What is an individual's drive? That's their internal motivation for engaging diverse people in an effective way. Are you motivated to do that? What is your current knowledge of diverse people? What is your strategy? We used the analogy earlier of going into a foreign country. Do you actually think in a proactive way, how am I going to conduct myself as I engage these diverse people? And action is your ability to aggregate your drive, knowledge, and strategy into an effective plan that allows you to walk and to work alongside diverse people in an equitable and effective, culturally intelligent way. That's kind of one bank of assessment. And the other bank of assessment in this product we use called CQ Pro is it places the individual on 10 cultural value continuums. I won't go through all 10, but for instance, if Rachel, you were the person taken as you did, it's okay, is Rachel Gilmore more of someone who is transactional or relational? Are you more Martha or are you more Mary? Where do you fall on that continuum? Are you more of an individualistic thinker or a collectivist thinker? You brought up the communal nature of some of the people you're living with right now, right? Generally speaking, white people tend to be very individualistic. That's come out in the last 12 months. You see that I'm not wearing a mask. Nobody's telling me to wear a mask, right? Thinking about their individual rights, what have you. People of color, of course, they're thinking about the community. They want to protect the whole. That's very common for people in Africa or Hispanic, Latin American countries. It's not necessarily one's right or one's wrong. It's a both and. Yes, we should be individualistic, think about our own responsibility, but we also have to think about others, right? Even Paul tells us that in Philippians 2. So where do you fall on that continuum? And then, of course, there's many others. Power dynamics. Are you more comfortable in an environment where there's like a general and a colonel and a major and the orders come top down? Or are you expecting to sit around the table and make a group decision, right? So imagine when 25 people, let's say individuals, take that and you get all that information about these 25 individuals on your staff or on your leadership team, and you aggregate it. Now we see, where does the church fall? Individualistic versus collective, being versus doing, in terms of our drive, our knowledge, strategy. And again, once we get that data, then we can process that with the team. And then we can also say, oh, your drive is low. Hey, here's one thing we found. Your motivation is low. You say you want verbally to engage diverse people in an effective way, but according to the empirical data, you're in the lowest 25 percentile of worldwide norms with 150,000 people in 165 countries that have taken this assessment. So here is some remedies to strengthen your drive, to strengthen your motivation to engage diverse perspective. Here are some prescriptions, things we recommend at Mosaix. And that's how organizations then get better.
That's great. I love it. And I love the description. It is this general MRI that just gives you a starting point so you can be strategic about how you follow up and how you get healthy as an organization.
And when I'm talking about getting better, I'm talking about improvement, right? As I mentioned, CQ in the moment is a selfie. The good news is you can improve, and that's the goal. It's like sanctification, right? You're not stuck where you're at right now. With the right prescriptions, if you will, the right strategy and with intentionality, you as an individual, you as an organization can improve your CQ over time. You're never going to get there. Sometimes people say, oh, here's Mark DeMoss. He's an expert on, multi-ethnic ministry. I tell people all the time, if anybody tells you they're an expert in this subject, do not listen to that person, right? I mean, this is a lifelong journey, right? And so the point is, the good news is you can improve, though. You're not just stuck with, well, that's just who I am. That's just who our church is, right? No, with intentionality and the right prescriptions, we can improve that. And that's what I mean by getting better. We want to pursue organizationally, grow in our CQ to more effectively engage an increasingly diverse society, all for the sake of advancing a credible gospel. And that's why I'm so excited about what we're able to offer, Rachel, through Mosaix Global Network now with CQ assessment and training for faith-based organizations throughout the country.
Love it. Love that we're talking about the importance of this cultural intelligence. Everybody needs it in this day and age, but especially people in faith communities, because, we've all seen in the last 6 months what Christian nationalism has done. And the fact that Sunday mornings are still some of the most segregated times and places in all of America means that until we do this work, until we face the fact that we are not perfect, that we are sick, that we have stomach ulcers or need healing, we're not going to do the work, the holy hard work that we're called to. So, if you guys want to know more, do more, get started on this journey, then you know who to reach out to. Thank you, Mark, for talking through CQ with us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on our latest episode of Mosaix Today with Rachel and Mark.
You've been listening to Mosaix Today with Rachel and Mark. Take a moment to leave a comment, and subscribe to this podcast. To learn more about who we are, what we do, and why, visit mosaixtoday.info. That's mosaixtoday.info. I'm Alex Diaz. We'll see you next time on Mosaix Today.